And one. Well, hey, Dave Melinda here, Positive Polarity Podcast. Hope things are going awesome for you this week. I got a question like I do every week, but this one's a little bit different, and this one is going to be a huge education time for me. So please buckle in because this is a topic that you probably have heard of, but aren't very aware of what it is. I know for myself, that's how I'm approaching today. So my question is, when you hear ADHD, those four letters together, ADHD, like what do you think of? And I know that I have these blind spots, I have these misnomers of what those are. And oddly enough, I have actually been working with a client that we think one of our people might have ADHD. And I'm like, I got to figure this out. So I am honored to be hanging out with Skye Waterson. How are you today?
I'm doing great.
Awesome. And it's already tomorrow in New Zealand. So we already
Yep, I'm
established
hanging
that.
out and
So
tomorrow.
this is kind of weird. It's Tuesday here, Wednesday there, which is awesome. You're the founder of Unconventional Organization. So fill us in, Sky,
hmm
on what is Unconventional Organization.
Yeah, Unconventional Organization is a company that I founded. I've been running for it for about 5 years now that helps executives and entrepreneurs who have what I call ADHD-ish. So they either have diagnosed or suspected ADHD to learn how to scale their business and get their time back without getting burned out or overwhelmed.
Wow. Well, hey, anybody that can get us time back without overwhelm and burnout, I'm all about that. So I want to kind
Yeah.
of start at the beginning for somebody that maybe, because I even had to full disclosure, I have no problem saying that I had to look up what ADHD stood for. And I have
hmm
attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Is that accurate?
Yes. Yep,
So
that's the
tell us,
one.
what is that? Fill us in on what that is.
Yeah, so what ADHD is essentially it's persistent and pervasive across time, struggles with, impulsivity and executive functioning differences. So people, if they have ADHD, so primarily hyperactive, they might be feeling like they're driven by a motor. They might stand up in places where they're supposed to be sitting down, struggling with focus in that way. If they have primarily inattentive type, they might be distracted, looking out the window, getting sidetracked on a bunch of different tasks. And, everybody has those days when they can feel
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
But if you have ADHD, it's something that's happening across different parts of your life and across time for you.
So, and because in prep for this, I used our famous Chat GBT and asked
Mm-hmm.
what are some of the common signs of ADHD. And they talked about things like inattention, impulsivity, like you said, emotional
Yep.
regulation, and time management. I mean, I looked at those, I'm like, shoot, I think some of those affect me, right? So how do you, as you're a doctor, correct?
No, I am not a doctor.
But your PhD, wait a minute, are you not done with your PhD yet?
We have a whole story to get
Oh,
into with
all
that
right.
one.
Well, we'll
Yeah.
get to the story in a minute. But
Yeah.
in your research and in your world, and in the
Mm-hmm.
unconventional organization, how
Mm-hmm.
do you determine that difference? Because I got to believe there's a bunch of people that like are really get paranoid, like, oh my gosh, I got that because they read it. So, like, how do you
Mm-hmm.
determine
Mm-hmm.
the difference between somebody, like you said, ish? Maybe I have some of the signs, but I really don't
Mm-hmm.
feel like I have that. How
Yeah.
do you notice that difference there?
I definitely think a doctor wouldn't even be able to tell you you need to go see a psychiatrist really to get that diagnosis. It is quite complicated because there can be a
Okay.
lot of mitigating factors, autism, depression, anxiety. But for the people who are wondering if it's something that they struggle with, I think the biggest thing is, like I said, it's something that is happening all the time for you, not just some of the time when you're tired on a Friday or when you're exhausted on a Wednesday or whatever it is. And it's also starting to, you know, particularly the executive functioning piece. So you might say, oh, well, I don't feel very impulsive, but man, I struggle with remembering where I put my keys and trying to, manage and imagine like long-term projects, what I'm going to be doing, that is something that could be a sign of executive dysfunction, which you can have in a variety of different circumstances, traumatic brain injury, mental health struggles. So you might have the executive functioning struggles of ADHD, even if you're subclinical or you don't get a diagnosis of ADHD.
So is it something that is starts like at a young age, Sky, or is it something that we happens later in life? I mean, for people listening, whether they're thinking about their family or their team, which we'll
Hmm.
get into later, is it something that starts very early in life for people?
Yeah, so if you have ADHD, then the expectation is you have ADHD. You might not have, sometimes it gets missed. So, especially in women, there can be a lot of masking, or maybe you're in an environment where you're particularly being supported. And I think that's often where people, if they shift into an environment which is less supportive of their ADHD, can really start to come out if they have additional responsibilities. But yes, the expectation is it's something that we have from a young age. And, a lot of people who are doing the diagnosis will speak to, family members or look at report cards to sort of see if this is something that was there from childhood as well.
Okay. And then it kind of just made me think of something. Are there different degrees of this? Because I feel like you could, like you said, if it doesn't happen every day, there might be something there. But if it's something that you're battling constantly, it feels like there would be different
Hmm.
degrees of that. And I'm just curious what your research has shown on that.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting research on this. So this is not something. So if you are a layperson and you go and get a diagnosis, they're going to say, look, you have it or you don't have it. Particularly because ADHD comes with medication support. So,
Okay.
there's a lot of rules about medication. It's one of the reasons it's so tricky to get the diagnosis in the first place. But when you look at studies of ADHD, you do find people talk about like subclinical, so people who got to a certain, because obviously often you're doing a score, people who got a number that was like close but didn't get to the diagnosis. So that is more of a conversation now, than it used to be, I think.
And you talked about medication, is that
Hmm.
is that the cure, or are there some other tools that people can use? Where's that research
Yeah.
right now pointing?
Oh gosh, I'm not going to say the research is split for very many reasons, one of which being
Okay.
that it's being partially funded by different groups. But yeah, I would say that it used to be, and in some cases it still is, that when you got a diagnosis, you were given medication and no discussion was had about any behavioral support at all. Now people understand skills are important as well because you want to have something to fall back on. And also because for a lot of people, the medication is a journey. For some people, I was talking about this the other day actually, for some people, medication will be a one and done. They'll get the medication, it will totally work for them. That's awesome. For other people, they will find that they need to titrate a little bit. It's not going to make sense initially. They might have to switch to a different kind of medication, or maybe it never quite works exactly the way they want it to. So it's not a one size fits all for everybody.
So, like you talked about depression, and you can see, like, if you look at that, there's times where a medication will help, and then there's coping mechanisms and different things that there's kind of a joint effort, right? It's a combination
Hmm.
of some behavioral modification
Hmm.
along with some drugs. Is that kind of the same with the ADHD scenario where it's usually going to be a combination of both of those?
I would say that today, if you're talking to most people, they would encourage you to get a combination of both. Yeah. People talk
Okay.
about it colloquially as pills and skills. You want to
Pills and skill. There you go. Wow. Well, hey, don't take that the wrong way, everybody listening, because
get.
this is a
No,
positive,
no. And
positive stuff.
people have different ways of talking about it as well, like I often say I'm not medicated. Not that I have an issue with it. I think it's awesome to get the support that you need. I just ended up having kids and I didn't do it because I was like, well, I'm going to be the most ADHD person I can be because I need to develop
Sure,
systems about this thing.
sure.
Um, but I think that for a lot of people, it can be quite reassuring to know, especially because there's shortages that have been happening and all that kind of stuff, to know that they have something that they can fall back on as well.
Yeah. Wow. Well, you hinted at it, so I want to kind of go back into your world a little bit because a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people listening today, Skye, love to hear about the journey from, in your case, you worked for the university and then you
Mm-hmm.
transitioned into working for yourself. So take us back into so tell us your story. You're in university, whatever you feel comfortable sharing.
Yeah.
No one's listening but you and me. So go ahead and, fill us in on what happened.
Yeah, so I went to university full of, I think I was one of those young ADHD women who did the classic overcompensate and burn out every couple of years. That was kind of my zone. So I went
Okay.
in, I wanted to be a clinical psychologist. I studied, psychology honors to do that. Ended up shifting more into becoming an academic. So my whole life, all of my 20s and my early 30s was about being an academic. I think I did a, I say I think because gets sketchy after a while, but I did an honors, I did a postgraduate certificate in health, I did a master's in sociology, and then I actually burned out after my master's because, I got the grades for a PhD scholarship, but I was so burned out. I didn't know I had ADHD. I didn't have any of the skills. I was just absolutely just throwing everything against the wall. Ended up, taking a year off, going and making art and just not even sure if I wanted to come back. And so
Yeah.
when I did come back to do the PhD, I said, okay, well, if I'm going to do this, I need to go to my inclusive learning center. Shout out to them, amazing people. And I need to find out if there's something wrong with me,
Sure.
basically,
And
because
did you know you had
yeah.
ADHD at this time?
No idea, no idea.
Okay.
Which is crazy because like I said, studied, psychology. I studied neuroscience. I taught developmental psychology. I was a tutor and worked in the several universities actually,
Yeah.
doing research and teaching, for a number of years. But it wasn't something that was really talked about, especially with adults. So, I thought maybe I had dyslexia. I went in, they did a bunch of, tests and clicking buttons, leaving you in rooms to write things down, things like that. And they came back, I think it was 2 days. And then they came back and they said, look, we don't know about the dyslexia, but we're pretty confident that you have ADHD and you should go and get tested. And I
Mhm.
was like, what? It was completely just such a surprise. I had
Yeah.
no concept that that was something that adults could have. It was such a new thing
Sure.
like
Sure.
now it feels like everyone talks about it, but now at the time it
Yeah.
wasn't.
So did it feel like a cancer diagnosis where your stomach dropped and you're like, oh my gosh, am I gonna live? Am I gonna be okay? Was that like that had to be traumatic, I would guess, at that point.
It was weird. It was mostly a relief to have something, to
Okay. Well, that's
know
good.
something,
Yeah.
because I think, you sort of get to a point where you're like, I think I have something. Like I didn't go in there because my life was hunky dory. I was burning out.
Yeah.
Sometimes my writing was amazing, sometimes it was awful. So I knew there was something there. Um, but it's like somebody hands you a whole new section of your like personality you didn't even know existed. So the first thing
Wow.
I did was go home and Google what is ADHD and just dive into everything I could learn about it. And then you have to go back through your whole life. And for
Sure.
those of you who have had this diagnosis, it is exhausting because you're like, oh, this makes sense. That's why I kept changing my degree. This is, and if I'd known this and if I'd known this, and so you can get into that space as well.
Sure. Wow. Oh my gosh, that's so cool. I mean, that's just so much that had to be, again, scary, but yet, like you said, there was a relief there.
Hmm.
And like, were people, because it's kind of like people that have a handicap of some kind, there's if you don't have a handicap, you really don't know how to connect and communicate with that person. I don't think I have ADHD. In listening to what you were saying, I don't have the extended periods of that, like you were
Hmm.
referring. So, like, I'm on the outside looking in on this. So, I would, if
Hmm.
I want to try to take this into like corporate world, it would be hard to, if I knew that you were on my team and you had that, I would be like, it would be really hard. I wouldn't know, am I supposed to treat you different? Am I supposed to,
Mm-hmm.
there's like this thing,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a
Mm-hmm.
genuine, it's not like you're bad.
Mm-hmm. Oh
It's just like a
yeah. Yeah.
genuine fear that I would have. So
Mm-hmm.
for people listening that may have know somebody with ADHD, how do they what do we do? I mean, because again, I don't want to treat you special, but
Mm-hmm.
you are
Mm-hmm.
special just because of who you are. So it's help me
Mm-hmm.
kind of unpack that a little bit if you could.
Yeah. It's a good question. I think, assuming there's different kinds of people with ADHD. So there's the person who has ADHD but doesn't know that they have ADHD. So there's probably a lot of people in my life who thought, "Huh, Skye might have ADHD," and then never did anything about it, right?
Right?
There's the people who have ADHD, but they don't know what to do about it right now. They're still in the phase of just being like, I have ADHD. Because, like, if you just say that to somebody, especially you're taking medication, but it can actually take a long time to get the medication, to get it sorted. So there's a period where you just say, I have this thing, and everyone goes, cool. Do you know what to do? And they're like, nope. And that's kind of like a space you can be in as well. And then there's the
Sure.
the more experienced person with ADHD who says, like, I need this kind of earphones and I need to work at these times of day. And so the two the person who doesn't know and the person who's got a really good handle on it, they're usually not the
Yeah.
ones that you're really engaging with. It's more the person in the middle. Um,
Okay.
and so for that person, it's often a bit of a conversation around saying, just how do you think you work best? And because I had the opportunity to work with the New Zealand government on this,
Okay.
the intelligence services and the health services as well on this exact question. And for a lot of the time, it was going, okay, people are different. People have strengths and weaknesses. If you're ADHD, those strengths and weaknesses can be a bit more extreme. Like from the research, we know the strength is creative problem solving, original thinking, out of the box thinking. They're the ones who'll pull an idea out of a hat no one else has thought of, or they'll come up with an original idea instead of iterating around the idea everyone else has. So that's awesome, right? Let's focus on that. But then on the other side, organizational systems, impulsivity, and distraction. So really, when we're thinking about it, we're going, okay, they need help with time blindness, working memory struggles. So put more clocks up is the number one thing I say to people as a tip.
Really?
Put more clocks up, especially in your meeting rooms. If you
Okay.
have a meeting room and the person who's standing to be in the meeting cannot see a clock, then you are doing it wrong because
So
they're not going to know.
what does that clock do for you, Sky?
Yeah, so basically what time blindness is, and I didn't know about this at all until I found out I had ADHD because it is kind of hard to be in other people's brains, is
Yeah.
that when you have ADHD, you tend to struggle with sensing time passing. If you're
Okay.
neurotypical, you'll have an idea of it's been about 10 minutes, it's been about 20 minutes. You'll sort of naturally know that. When you have
Yeah.
ADHD, your brain is very like 1 minute can feel like an hour if it's boring, and an hour can feel like 1 minute if it's interesting. So it doesn't really have the same feeling. So we need to externalize time in order to avoid being late. And also when projecting out, if this is going to take a week, this is going to take
Yeah.
3 months, like we need to see the time.
So would you like get nervous or tense or panicky if there wasn't a clock in range for you? I mean, what happens
100%.
if it's not there?
Yeah, well, if it's not there, then we're just flying blind. We're just out here in the wilderness, just like,
But that's got
I
to be
wonder what time it
stressful.
is. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
it is. Yeah.
Okay. Oh my gosh. See, I would have never have known that. And you were talking
Mm-hmm.
about the outside of the box thinking. So I want
Mm-hmm.
to kind of tie it into, we do a lot of work with DISC, and you were kind enough to take an assessment for us. And it just helps me to know how to better communicate with you. But there's a
Mm-hmm.
piece in there. Now I'm rethinking my strategy here, because there's a piece in there that talks about being receptive, which is open to outside of the box thinking. For me, my score
Hmm.
on that is like 100 out of 100. I'm always thinking
Hmm.
outside the box. And then the reverse of that is structured, where you have to have a very defined system for living. So where
Hmm.
would you
Hmm.
fit in that from an ADHD standpoint? Do you the structure for you, is that a positive thing for you? Is that like stressful for you? What is structure like? 9 o'clock we're doing this, 9:15 we're doing this. Does that help you or does that stress you
That
out?
is that is such a funny question to ask someone with ADHD because the answer is and is always true. I love creativity. I love thinking about new ideas. I love new stuff. But if I don't have some kind of structure at like this time I'm doing this, at this time I'm doing that, my whole
Okay.
life will generally fall apart. So
Really?
the answer is I have a structured life that I've
Okay.
designed. And so when you work with me, I always talk about, designing it and making it yours, not somebody else's, because
Okay.
that can really suck.
Sure.
But I love let's just deep dive this on a Wednesday afternoon, and so there's always a push pull there.
Sure. Wow, that is so cool. I mean, and that's where again, I don't want to say outsider like I'm normal and you're not. For somebody that doesn't think they have ADHD, it would be interesting to have that discussion because it would just go. It's kind of like this right now. I'm
Hmm.
very cognizant of the time just because of that I'm in charge of this, so to speak. Are you just like,
We're
do you
just
know
chilling.
just
Yeah, we're just hanging out. I mean, I one of the great things about, these kinds of situations is I can't see the time, but until
yeah.
I look at it, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, like we've been talking for this many minutes." Like yeah, no, I don't know.
Oh my gosh. And so does that then, do you use Outlook for your calendar? Do you use some kind of calendar for work?
Yeah, so I use and I have built systems that are based on research. So one of the things I've done, which is something I've been very passionate about, is I look at ADHD primary research, so academics, articles, meta-analyses, things like that. And I
Okay.
find like in them, because usually they're not designed for people with ADHD, they're designed to like talk about medication and psychiatry and that kind of thing. I find things that are particularly helpful for people with ADHD, and I use that to build, test, and then provide systems that help people with ADHD. So one of the ones that I have, for example, is I have a focus filter that I use, and you guys can always like DM me, positive on
Yeah.
Instagram at Unconventional
Sure.
Organization if you want a copy. I love giving it away. But
Cool.
it's something that then allows you to say, okay, I'm feeling overwhelmed and go through and get to focused and then put the most important things into your calendar. So I use Google Calendar, but I will say I'm what I consider to be app agnostic. Like use a bullet journal, use a calendar. I don't build things that only work on particular apps because I've never found that people with ADHD will want to stay on one app forever and have it just be that one thing.
Wow. This is fascinating. Hey, we're going to take a quick break. I want to get back to you were in college and I want to get to
Yeah.
that. So we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Welcome back. I am so honored to be hanging out with Skye Waterson, founder of Unconventional Organization, and we are doing a deep dive on ADHD, which is fascinating for me. I'm loving this. This is great. So thank you so much. You're educating me. Forget anyone else that's listening around the world right now. I am just enjoying this so much. So you were talking about some tools and different things. So go back to you're in college, you're kind of working this through. You didn't know
Hmm.
you had ADHD. You find out that you have it. Did that change your kind of your course,
Yeah.
your direction then? Kind of what happened next at that point?
It really did for me because I'd gone into, so I was lucky enough to get a PhD scholarship, which was awesome. It was like secure money for the next 4 years. You go in, I already had my PhD topic pre-assigned as well, and I couldn't change it.
Okay,
And so I was on track and I just needed to, focus on this thing and do it for the next 4 years and I would be done. I would
sure.
be, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But when I found out I had ADHD, I felt compelled to learn about it. I had really no choice because it had been this thing that was taking up so much of my life and burning me out. So I started a university postgraduate community. So I started just by meeting with other people who were like me, who were neurodiverse in some way, asking them a ton
Yeah.
of questions, like trying to get a sense of where everyone was at. I had obviously done a lot of teaching in university, so it was very natural for me to kind of bring people
Yeah.
together and then I started researching, ADHD. I had access to all of the resources, so I was very lucky in that way to be able to start researching it. And I ended up actually starting to teach in schools. Once I had this information, I was teaching, teachers like how to help, with students, that kind of
Sure.
thing.
Yeah.
And then I was doing the PhD alongside that. And then when COVID hit, obviously we all had to go home, and that really changed a lot. And so at
Yeah.
that point, I was looking for an option to just keep doing what I was doing, which I loved, like talking and teaching about ADHD. I
Yeah.
found coaching at that point, and I decided to start doing it. And I also decided to start writing articles about
Okay.
ADHD weekly to keep me, accountable. We love that
Yeah. Sure.
accountability.
Yep.
And I included, references because that's just what I did, academia and all that.
Yeah.
And it really took off. And that like just went crazy. And I was completely like I'd liked the idea of running a business. I loved to teach, but the idea that that was going to be what it became, it really
Sure.
did just take off. Yeah.
Wow. So you then make a decision to jump into being an entrepreneur, a business owner. So you found this unconventional organization. Um, what is so for someone listening, what value do you bring? What would they call you for or connect with you? Where do you fit into that corporate structure type of thing for people that might think somebody on their team or they might have ADHD?
Yeah, yeah. I'm basically the person who comes in when you have a problem with somebody who has ADHD and they're struggling and they
Okay.
want systems that are going to last, that are going to be simple, that are going to feel natural for their brain and are going to be based on research. That's kind of what I do. So I build them, and I build them, like I said, mostly for executives and business owners. I do provide a lot of support for people with their team as well, but usually I'm working in more with leaders, and people who are running the businesses, because often those people tend to have ADHD. Um,
Wow.
and so I will help you. Like I work with people who have got 6 and 7 figure businesses, and people who are trying to get to that point. And we'll go through your revenue dashboard. I'll talk about how to support your time blindness in, projecting out your business goals. We'll talk about how to avoid shiny object syndrome, not get distracted, how to actually
Sure.
focus, and we build all of those things out.
Wow. So, oh my gosh. So now I'm rethinking my strategy again because I'm the kind of guy, I don't know about you, but I have like 20 different tabs open on my computer at
Mm-hmm.
once. And I'm down this rabbit hole and that rabbit hole.
This is a
I
whole
mean,
journey for you.
right? It's like, oh my gosh, and an hour goes by. I'm like, whoa, what just happened? I mean,
Yeah.
so there's obviously I feel like there's, like we talked about before, different degrees of this.
Mm-hmm.
Do you
Mm-hmm.
tend to see that there's like stigma around ADHD right now where, people don't necessarily want to admit it. They're
Yeah.
afraid to say they have it. I mean, they don't want to
Yeah.
tell the team or their boss. How does that work? I mean, talk to the person that's listening right now, Skye, that might feel they have it and they're just so afraid to tell anybody
Mm-hmm.
get
Yeah.
tested. What encouragement do you
Yeah.
have for that person?
Well, I think one of the pieces of encouragement that I have is, for me personally, about 50% of the people I work with do not have a diagnosis. I don't give out medication. I don't diagnose anybody. I always like to say that up front. So for me, it's about working with your executive functioning. And like I said, that could be for a variety of reasons. ADHD is one of the common ones. And so just because you don't know if you have ADHD doesn't mean you can't get support that works for your brain. So I work with people who say, I don't know if I have ADHD. I've been told I might. I've been
Yeah,
told to look into it. A lot of it resonates with me. Can you just help me organize my business and we can do the whole do I have ADHD? Should I get diagnosed thing later?
yeah.
And so sometimes that is what I do. Like not everybody comes to me because they went and got the diagnosis. Sometimes they're waiting for the diagnosis or they're thinking about it. And that doesn't mean you can't get the systems that you need that are going to feel good for your brain, that are going to help grow your business.
Wow. And you referenced it a couple times, so I kind of want to ask the question because this is a brain thing. And I
Mm-hmm.
feel like it's like we were created this way. So it's not like I sniffed glue as a kid or, I did something stupid as a kid. It just is you as an individual. So it's got to be hard for people to accept that. I mean, it's a blind spot, I guess, for a lot of people. They don't want to admit that. Do you run into people that are like, yeah, I don't have it, and they're like, and you're like, oh my gosh, you totally do? Do you run
I
into
do.
those people a lot?
Sometimes their people will reach out to me. That can happen. Or their like partner will reach out to me. I do say like, look, I don't work with somebody who doesn't want to have ADHD. Like I can't help you.
Yeah.
But I think I think the best thing to think about is just, you know, ADHD, I can't remember the exact number, and I need to look it up because somebody asked me yesterday as well. If you are an entrepreneur, you're like 300% more likely to have ADHD than if you're
Okay.
not. It's very, 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 very high in people who are entrepreneurial because a lot of the benefits of ADHD are entrepreneurial. I worked with my mentor, John, and he wrote this amazing book on ADHD for entrepreneurs. And, we were talking about the idea when you look at the research, the ability to just take action, the ability to, even the impulsivity, which is generally seen as negative, can be a benefit when you're talking about entrepreneurship. So it feels like a natural fit for a lot of people. So if you're thinking, I'm an entrepreneur and I feel like I have ADHD, you're statistically speaking, you're more likely to be correct than if you weren't an entrepreneur.
Okay. So where would that person go, Sky, if they're listening and they're thinking, because I did again, along with what are the common signs of
Hmm.
ADHD, I asked ChatGPT, like, how common is this? And the research that they unpacked was like under 10% of
Yeah.
people, but yet it
Hmm.
could be much higher because it goes undiagnosed, I'm assuming. So, I
Hmm.
mean, I'm just curious. It's just like where do we go? What do we do? I mean, it's just so
Yeah.
scary. It's like out of sight, out of mind. I don't want this is the way I've always been, so I'm always going to
Yeah.
be this way. I don't need to know
Yeah.
more. But
Yeah.
is that kind of what unconventional organization does?
Yeah, and you'll see even our name, like we're chilling, we're unconventional organization. We can kind of all get down with that. So it's,
Yeah. Yep.
if you want to know about the research, we have a podcast called the ADHD Skills Lab. We dive into the research and we interview entrepreneurs who have ADHD. So if you want to get a sense of it, that's a great way to start. My recommendation for you is just what is your biggest problem right now that you're having in your business? And then, figure out, a tool to help, an ADHD tool. So that's why I give away the prioritization filter, because what we found was most people who came to us were, I'm overwhelmed. I don't know what to start with. I start the day and I feel paralyzed and I don't do the important stuff. And I didn't even really think if it was important until later. So we have a process to help with that. So you can just try that. And
Yeah.
if it works for you, then awesome, keep trying it for a bit and we can worry about what that means later.
Sure. Sure.
Just take it
So it's
one step at a time, is what I would say.
Yeah, and it's called the prioritization filter. So kind of as we
Hmm.
start to land the plane today, kind of walk us, what does that look like and I mean, is it an online assessment? What is it? So for somebody that's listening, that's like their interest is peaked, what would be
Yeah,
the
yeah.
next step for them?
Yeah, so you can go Unconventional Organization on Instagram and you can DM me positive and we'll send you a copy of it. It's called the Focus Filter. Or you can go on our website and just search Focus Filter and you'll find there a video and a link to a dashboard that you can download. But essentially, how it works is it helps you do if you've ever heard of the Eisenhower matrix, that
Hmm.
idea, it
Yep.
helps you do that in a more ADHD friendly way. So it helps you go through one step at a time because with ADHD we can struggle with the working memory aspect of trying to do all of this urgent important stuff all at once.
Yeah.
It helps you
Wow.
go through and just brain dump everything that's in your head. Don't look at your emails. We have
Yeah.
instructions like to give you, as you go back. So just follow the instructions.
Focus.
And then from there it takes you through, what are we doing? What is the urgent? What does it mean to actually have something be urgent, which is very specific. We have criteria there
Sure.
for you. What's
Wow.
important, and then, time block it. Give yourself a
Yeah.
reward for starting. Know from the research we need that reward. So it's all there for you and you can just follow along.
That's awesome. So for people that don't know about the Eisenhower matrix, it's a four box thing and it's the questions really are so powerful. It's two questions.
Hmm.
Is it important or not important? And is it urgent or not urgent? Because so many people put it in the important and urgent bucket, which means we got to do it like right now. Like
Yeah.
a house is falling, a house is burning down.
Hmm.
We got to go right now and put it out, right? That's
Yeah.
urgent and important. But
Yeah.
an email that comes from somebody that something's due at the end of the week, it's important, but it's not urgent. So then you can schedule that time. Is
Hmm.
ADHD kind of is that Eisenhower matrix a hard thing, a hard tool to use if you have ADHD, or does it actually help you?
It can be useful, but one of the biggest struggles that people have is they go, I don't know what's important. It feels like everything's important. So we have a more of a clarifying system for you to make sure you know what's important. And
Gotcha.
then also, I don't know what's urgent. And there's a lot of things that sit in the not important, not urgent, but easy to tick off space that can be where we hang out most of the time. Um,
Yeah.
and especially with ADHD.
Wow. And I mentioned like 10% of the population have it. What did your research show? About the same, or did you
Yeah,
find
I think
something
it
different?
was, yeah, I think it's about 5%, but it does depend on whether you're talking about kids or adults. But also, like I said, it is higher for entrepreneurs. So,
Yeah.
that number might increase for entrepreneurs.
Oh, and that's again only diagnosed. There's probably a lot of people
Oh,
that are
yeah.
yeah.
It's a
And
long
some
process
people,
to get diagnosed.
yeah, I would be like kind of proud of it. I have it's actually I try to use this with my wife once in a while to get sympathy. I
Hmm.
have lumbosacral transitionalization,
Oh,
which
wow.
basically just means I have an extra vertebrae and it's
Hmm.
fused to my hip bone. Means nothing, no pain, no change, no yeah, yeah, I don't even
Hmm.
know I have it. I never would have known other than I got a my chiropractor told me once, and I try to use that to
Hmm.
my advantage, and it never works. I think that again, as we do more research on ADHD, I'm hoping that it becomes more accepted
Yeah.
because like, it feels like it would just be, I wouldn't know how to react or act. And I have to say, and this is going to sound horrible, Skye, but you are like, I wouldn't even know that you have
People say
that.
that all the time. Let
So
it be
it's
known I
like, oh
have a
my God.
fidget right here, and
There you go.
I'm.
But it's like, oh my gosh, it's just, I mean, so it would be really hard to, from the outside, if I was interviewing you
Hmm.
for a job,
Yeah.
if I was trying to get you on a team or whatever,
Oh
it would
yeah.
be, it's really
Work with a ton of
hard.
people that you just don't know they have ADHD. Yeah.
So it's not a negative. So it's again, it's not a negative thing. It's just a different way to process information. I mean, that
Yeah.
to me,
It's just a
like the easy,
difference.
yeah, it's just the easiest way to put that. So, um, last question before I let you go. I could sit all day and talk, and I know you wouldn't know the difference. So I gotta be very careful with it. So,
I
oh my
might
gosh,
notice that
sorry.
the sun started getting high.
Exactly. It's like, uh-oh, how come I'm so hungry? It's lunchtime already.
Yeah.
What would your tip of the day be for somebody listening? Maybe it's something that we covered.
Hmm.
Maybe it's just something in your heart we haven't shared yet. But what would your
Hmm.
tip of the day be today?
Yeah, I love this question because I am so passionate, whatever is bringing you to the ADHD conversation, I'm so passionate about helping people have that focus, balance, growth. And so for me, it's really to say, okay, give yourself a reward for starting a task. I know that sounds sacrilegious because you're so used to giving yourself a reward at the end of a task,
Yeah.
but what we know from the research, what we suspect is that when you're ADHD, you don't seem to get the dopamine boost for starting a task that neurotypicals do.
Okay.
And so you need to give yourself something for starting. So it could be sitting in a nice spot, listening to some music, grabbing a smoothie, whatever it is. Give yourself that little reward for starting in the space you're about to start in, and see how it goes. You might find it works better than you think.
Wow, that's pretty cool. So, and if you're not ADHD, you can still give yourself
You can still do
a
it. Yeah.
you can still
Everything. And
have a
this is what I
smoothie,
said.
listen to good music.
This
Absolutely.
is what I
We
said
always
to the
wait,
New Zealand government. Like, yes, everyone can do it. Like, you're not
right?
allowed. It's not
Yeah,
just for people who have ADHD.
we're so conditioned to wait until the end of a project before we actually
Mm-hmm.
can,
Yeah.
say congratulations or yay, yay team type of stuff. So,
Yeah.
so Skye, if somebody is listening today and they are concerned, excited, nervous, scared,
Mm-hmm.
skeptical, but they want to learn more about either you or the unconventional organization, what's the best way for people to connect with you?
Yeah, so you can find us at unconventionalorganisation.com. That's where you can find access to the podcast, which is really fun. Listen to, go through some of the research, get familiar with what this means. And then you can also find the free focus filter, help you get focused. And if you want to work with me, I do have a coaching program with other entrepreneurs who are committing to focus, balance, growth using ADHD systems. So you can apply there if you want to join us.
Awesome. Is that one-on-one coaching, Skye, or is that group or both, or how does that
I do
work?
both. So I have about five one-on-one clients that I take on a year. So I have
Okay.
one spot left if you guys want to
Gotcha.
DM me. Um,
Yeah.
and then I also have a coaching program that has a combination of one-on-one support and access to a wider community as well that you can apply there.
Wow, that's great. You make me feel so much better. I was so nervous because I'm like, when you don't know something, it's like, man, I
Yeah.
don't know what I'm getting myself into, right? And so you made it so easy. So thank you so much for hanging out
No
with us. And
worries.
I love this topic just because it is freeing to be able to, just sit and think for a minute about yourself. And I think self-care is much needed in today's world, and we seem to, be going a million miles an hour and we forget about taking care of ourselves. So if this helped one person to do the focus filter, if it got one person to call you, if it got one person to at least bring it up in their group, because again, that's got to be
Mm-hmm.
a really challenge to work with it and then not offend people. And then there's
Mm-hmm.
HR and there's legal things. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
all that stuff, I'm sure you're well
Yeah.
versed in and you can give
Mm-hmm.
people advice on that. So thank you so much for hanging out on your Wednesday, on my Tuesday. Super cool. So I'm going to have a great rest of the day. I sure hope you do. And again, thank you for all the research that you're doing. And I love to keep learning from you. So again, thank you so much.
Thanks so much. It was fun.